In this video, we're going to talk about our last of our database objects for this week, and that is functions. You've already used database functions many times. We have done sum, average, count. Those are all functions that come built in to the database system. We can also define our own functions. And there are two things that functions can do. They can return a scalar. Actually, they can return a little bit more than that. I have them over here. The two we're going to look at, though, are table-valued functions. That's a function that returns a table of data. Okay? And scalar-valued functions return a scalar, which is a single number, a single result. Okay, so we're either going to get back a single result or we're going to get back an entire table from the two different functions we're going to do. There's also aggregate functions. You've done aggregate functions. I named some of them just a minute ago. You've used some aggregate functions. And then there's some built-in system functions for configurations and doing things for security and all kinds of things. But we're going to create these two because they're the ones at your level that you need to know about. So we're going to start with a scalar valued function. So let's look at the table that we want to use for this. So let's select, we'll get all the columns from sales.salesorder header. Okay, so here's our sales order header, and if we go through here and look, we're going to be using the columns. Let's see. Tax amount and freight. Okay, so let's change this up here. Let's just get the tax amount and the freight. So every time somebody does a sale, they're going to have to include how much tax there is on that sale and how much shipping, which is the freight charge. So we're just going to look at those two columns. We're going to write a function that automatically calculates the total of the tax and freight. Right? Not a super hard thing. We're just adding two numbers together. But it's a good example problem to show you what a function can do and how to write your own. So if I told you how to guess what the keyword is, make a new function, you would probably guess create function, and you would be right. All right, we're going to create a function, and like everything else that we do with create statements, let's give it a name. We'll call this T and F, short for tax and freight. Then in our function, we need to specify a list of parameters. Now, let me be clear about something. A function is also like a method, right? We can pass it parameters, and it passes us information back. It's like a value returning method. We pass in the arguments, it gets accepted into the two parameters. We do something with those, and then we return a result. So the first thing we have to do, similar to what we do in a method in Java or C#, is define our parameters. So we're going to have a tax parameter, and its type will be, we're going to use money. That would make sense for taxes, right? And freight, which we're also going to use money because we're not talking about how heavy the item is. We're going to talk about how much it costs to ship the item. Okay, so those are the parameters, and if you look, it's really, really similar to Java C#, where we have the name of the function followed by parentheses with two parameters separated by commas. I could write those all in one line if I want to make it look more like traditional programming languages that you've done. Okay. We also have to define, now this is the part that looks a little bit different, what the function returns. And in this case, it's going to return, and we have to tell it a return type. It returns money. So if you think about a Java or C#, we usually have public and then a return type, which can be void, or it could be something like money or double or int. In this case, the return type comes at the end of the function definition. And then we type as, and guess what comes after that? Here comes our code, right? So we still have that keyword as. So we're going to define how this works now. So we have to define the beginning and ending of the statements that make up our function. And we do that with begin and end. Okay. So we have a begin and end. You can think of that if you want to keep comparing this back to other programming languages you already know. You can think of this as the opening curly brace and the ending curly brace, the begin and end of your method. Begin and end. And we could do lots of things in here. We could have we could have 100 statements doing all kinds of fancy stuff. This is just a simple one that's going to add these two together. So let's just do that. Give it a return statement. And we're going to return the tax. Oops, I have my caps lock on. The tax plus the freight. Okay. So it's a pretty simple function that we probably don't even really need. We could write it right into our query to add two columns together. We know how to do that, but we're not. We're doing it because I want to do a simple scalar function that returns a single value, in this case, a value of money. Okay. So let's create our function, and it completed successfully. We're getting that red squiggly because of the stuff up here, I'm sure. If I get rid of it, it'll probably go away. Yeah, it does go away. All right, so we created our function. It's a scalar valued function, so let's see if it appeared in here. There it is. DBO, T, and F. And there it tells us what our parameters are. So let's use our function. You've used functions before, so you probably already know how to do this. So we're going to select, let's get out, select, we'll get out the sales order ID. And then we're going to call our function, DBO, we called it T and F. Okay, and remember it takes two parameters, so we're going to pass it tax amount and the freight. And we're getting all this data from sales, that sales order header. Okay. So it's going to take the tax amount column and the freight column for each row, pass them to this function, and then use that result just like we would have used any other function, right? It's going to take those two and add them together, display the results in the second column. The first order column will have the sales order header. Let's go ahead and execute it. And there it is. For each sales order ID, we see the sum of their tax and freight. So we've done a scalar function. In the next video, I will show you how to do a table valued function.